Hello, everyone. Welcome to our episode of the Hormone Genius podcast. Today, we have with us Sophie Shepherd, and we're so excited to have Sophie with us today. Just a little bit that I know about Sophie, because we're going to learn so much about her. We're getting introduced to her today. Sophie is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and she's the founder of She Talks Health and the creator of She Talks Health podcast, and a co-creator of Empower Her, a 12-week gut and hormone restoration program. And Sophie helps people all across the globe in transforming their health. And she does this because she comes from her own personal and passionate experience in her own health journey, which we know that is such a common story of the women that we meet on this podcast, that our own journeys takes us to the next step of passion to empower other women. So we're happy to have Sophie here today to tell us about her story and what she went through and why she turned that into a whole, business basically to empower and help restore other women's health. Thank you, Sophie, for being with us today.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to share this. I hope that it reaches many women and it helps them in some way with their health. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Sophie joins us today from Florida. And we're really jealous, Jamie and I, because we're in Iowa and in Nebraska. And whenever you listen to it, it probably won't be relevant, but it is, I used to say this, it is butt ass cold. In Nebraska, in Iowa, I probably can't say that on a podcast, but I just did. It is super cold and we're jealous that Sophie's in Florida, even though it's not like super, super warm there. It's a lot warmer than it is here.
Yep.
But Sophie, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your journey and kind of when this all started for you.
Yeah, my journey is a long one. And I think most women can relate to that if they're dealing with hormone imbalances. But my stuff started with my gut, which is why I do the gut hormone connection for women, because a lot of people don't understand that connection. But I was 16 when my health issues started. My mom says I had gut issues even before that, but I remember them when I was 16. And the final trigger for me to get some help was I was drinking water and I was in pain. I mean, everything I put in my mouth hurt me. And I went to the gastroenterologist and they did a bunch of tests. I mean, having a colonoscopy done when you're a teenager, super not fun, or an endoscopy. And they just said, well, you have irritable bowel syndrome or IBS, stay away from acidic food and take a proton pump inhibitor, which lowers your stomach acid. And so being a kid and not knowing anything about this, I just followed their advice, but it didn't help. And I was totally that kid that was like running to the bathroom all the time at class and like constipated and just all the gut issues you can imagine. And I was like that all through high school and all through college. And after college, I ended up in a relationship with a man who I was living with, which ended up being very toxic to me emotionally, just really, really, really abusive. And I didn't really know because it was like my first adult relationship, but the stress of that, of living with someone who's abusing you on a daily basis, coupled with all my GI issues, I think really kind of toppled over my hormones. And so I ended up developing an autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid. And so basically my body was attacking my own cells in the form of my thyroid, which makes you feel like, just crap. Your hair is falling out, your nails are breaking, you are usually constipated, depressed, all of these symptoms, you're gaining weight for no reason. All these symptoms are mine. And so I went and I got some more support, and that's where kind of I hit a roadblock with my doctor, which I can definitely go into if you guys want to hear about that. But essentially it led me to functional medicine. I healed my gut and therefore I healed my hormones. And kind of the rest is history in terms of how that just inspired so much passion, because I found a lot of women were stuck the way I was. I was 22 and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I was being told it's all in your head. You're just depressed. Take this medication. Just so many things that were not helpful. And when I was given the authority to take care of myself and given the tools to do so, and my life changed, I felt like, well, gosh, there's probably a lot of women out there that need this information. I can't be the only one. So
you are not the only one. That is for sure. Sophie, oh my gosh, there's so much already I just want to talk about, because just in my practice, I don't think we fully kind of grasp sometimes how the emotional traumas that women and men go through, but particularly women, I think because of our hormones and the complexity of it, how that can lead to kind of a toppling over or a cascading of events in the body that leads to chronic disease. And it seems like that was definitely a trigger point for you, although it had been building for years. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about how you see that just in now that you're coaching other women. How often is that emotional kind of thing that was going on was a trigger for expressing disease?
I would say like 9 times out of 10. Pretty much when I do a thorough 90-minute intake with my new clients and we go through their history and I ask them about when did this start, there's usually some sort of trauma or stressful life event that was going on during the time. And there may have been an underlying issue going on prior, like for me with my gut, but things exploded because there was something, either sexual trauma or assault, emotional trauma, like the loss of a job, a big move, a abusive partner, a breakup, a collapse of a marriage, just like whatever we internalized as massive stress or trauma usually was in the same time frame as the symptoms showing up for the first place or getting really, really intolerable.
So it's something I think it's just really important for our listeners to pick up on in our own lives. When you're going through something super stressful, like make the connection between your body and what's happening, right? Because if like you went through a terrible breakup and then, 6 months later, you're dealing with all of these new symptoms, I think it's important to remember how stress like this impacts our body. So thank you for making that connection.
Thank you for spending the time going into it. It's the one part that we really don't want to deal with. People will take supplements, they'll take medication, but dealing with trauma, that was like a second part of my healing journey that I only realized years after I'd healed my gut and I thought I had healed my hormones, but really there was so much trauma stuck in the body still and that had to be released. So I'm really glad you decided to pick up on that. I think women really need to hear it.
Wow. Sophie, talk to us more about the gut. I've heard a lot, that 90% of serotonin is created in the gut, maybe even more. And perhaps, when we're thinking about our mood and our trauma, it would make sense that we're maybe underplaying the role of the gut and how that relates to hormone function. So can you explain to our listeners how that works functionally in regards to the gut and its relation to hormones?
Yeah, it's really a complicated answer. So I'll kind of think of, I'll tell you the broad strokes and then we can maybe go into each one a little bit. All disease starts in the gut, right? That's a very famous quote. Well, I believe all health begins in the gut. So here's how this might show up. Our digestive system is what is responsible for us absorbing the nutrients that we consume, right? Nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, amino acids from proteins. These are what create our hormones. So in addition, our digestive system is what helps to eliminate anything we don't need. So after our liver is done detoxing, things get dumped in the bowel and we have to detox our hormones through our gut. It's phase 3 of elimination. And we have to also eliminate our toxins. So you can imagine, right? If someone's either not eating a great diet or they have something going on in their gut, that's the third part I'll talk about, or they're not able to excrete their toxins and hormones, that there could either be not quite enough hormone or way too much and there's an imbalance. So I think the third way that I'll just mention, and we can maybe go into each one a little bit more, is the idea of like leaky gut or intestinal hyperpermeability, which is typically caused by an exposure to a pathogen or a food that your gut does not like. And when that happens, we can't absorb our nutrients well, and there can be a cascade of issues as well as dysbiosis and bacterial overgrowth. So I'm going to pause there because I don't know how much I need to go into each one, but those are kind of the 3 ways that I look at how gut impacts hormones. But there are many more, including what you talked about, which is our, serotonin and amino acids that create neurotransmitters, and that's our brain chemicals. So I'm going to pause.
Okay. Well, this is good. And I just want to, again, make it in some ways simple because so many people don't realize this connection, number one. And so many young women that I know either have, and I think it's more common, I feel like, to have constipation as an issue, or irritable bowel syndrome, like you were diagnosed with, Sophie, which I hate that diagnosis because it's like I don't know. It's just like, okay, irritable bowel. Like, yeah, anybody can have an irritable bowel on any given day. To me, it's not a real diagnosis.
It's not. I always say if you just remove the I, then it's just bullshit.
That is so funny. Oh, that's so perfect. Now I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that. It's so true. And this is, like so much of Western medicine, sometimes it's like, oh, well, we know what your symptom is. Great. We just told you have irritable bowel. Yeah, I already knew that. I live with my bowels, but we're not going to tell you why it's occurring or how to fix the problem. We're just going to give you a medication that treats the symptom.
Bingo.
So for the listeners who are, thinking, okay, I think I do have some digestive issues. Maybe I don't go to the bathroom but once a week, twice a week, which I think is something common. Or maybe I go a lot, or maybe I just have a lot of gas and irritable bloating and just all this stuff. Like, tell our listeners kind of how can they start to understand this connection to the gut and how they can start restoring their own gut.
Yeah, I'll make it really, really simple. If you have a symptom in your body and you haven't looked at your gut health, we got to look at your gut health. And that's because things like acne, eczema, anxiety, depression, autoimmune disease, and hormone imbalances can all be traced back to the gut. So it's not even just, we think it's just, bloating, diarrhea, gas, constipation, acid reflux. My gut, right? We think, I've got to do something about that. And that's 100% valid. But I will tell you, I run a GI MAPS test on every single client. And there is a percentage, and not a small percentage, of people who come to me with hormone issues or come to me with autoimmune issues or other things and have zero of the acid reflux, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, gas. They had none of that. And they have parasites and their bacteria is all imbalanced and they're not getting their estrogens out of their gut. So I think thinking about it simply is if there's a symptom that's been unresolved and you haven't taken a look at the gut, it might be a really good place to go to.
Mm-hmm. It's a great place to start.
Yeah. And you talked about GI mapping. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a functional test that I use in my practice. I find it to be really, really helpful and effective. It screens for bacterial pathogens like parasites and things like salmonella and E. coli that we hear a lot about in the news, but also things like Giardia or C. difficile. We hear about C. diff a lot, but also things like H. pylori, which can be a bacterial imbalance, and just straight up imbalances of too much of the bad stuff, not enough of the good stuff. And it also really wonderfully illustrates your intestinal health markers. So are you digesting and absorbing fat and protein like we were talking about earlier? And what's my reaction to gluten? And do I have leaky gut? All of these things. Is my hormones getting blocked up in my gut? All of those things can be discovered in this test. So I always run that because I find it kind of hits a lot of markers for people.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody does have an imbalance, let's say they have a parasite, how do you tell them to rid of it? What's the plan for that?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we can give as practitioners to females is the authority that they can do what they want to with their bodies. So often they're told to take a medication or told to do something that they maybe don't want. So I always like to present it like there's kind of a holistic way to deal with this, and then there's a medical way to deal with this. And it's your body, so it's your choice. I'm providing information and education, and then you can go forward. But if you want to do a holistic idea, then we can look at that and come up with a custom protocol for you. But typically, if someone's dealing specifically with a parasite, there's really three things we want to think about. We want to remove the parasite by using herbs, is how we would do it holistically. But we also want to repair any damage that the parasite might have caused, like leaky gut. And then we also want to improve the person's digestive health, because parasites and bacteria, I hate to gross anybody out, we all come in contact with them on a very regular basis, but it's really the ability of us to kill them with our stomach acid, keep them out with our stomach lining, and these types of things, these built-in mechanisms that we have. So if all we do is remove a parasite, but we don't deal with why that came to be in the first place, then it might come back. So that's how I work with women on that, if they want to go that way, if that's how they want to treat it.
That's great, Sophie. That's kind of how I approach it too in my practice. Is I give options. And I think that's always really important because I think, we intuitively know our own bodies and know kind of what we think is going to be best. And I love the fact that there is the ability to take both approaches too. I want to talk a little bit about, and I know parasites can freak people out. And honestly, like I did a whole summit on like participated in education in parasites, and it does completely kind of change your perspective of a lot of things. But I think we just need to know don't be freaked out by it. Everybody has parasites. I mean, we're hosts to trillions of bacterias. That's just the way our bodies function, and to the good of our bodies need those things, but sometimes things just get out of balance, and then you can have things creep in that just shouldn't be there. But it's, most of these things aren't going to hurt us in a dramatic way. They just chronically cause symptoms and inflammation in the body. And we just need to restore that balance. And that's where a functional practitioner like you, it can be so valuable because you're looking so much deeper. Like these tests, you really can't walk into a doctor's office and be like, hey, can you do a big stool test and find all these things. I mean, they can find the basics, but these go so much more beyond that.
I have so many thoughts of what you just said. It was so great. I love what you just said about where is the reason for functional nutrition or functional practitioners? And you just nailed it right on the head. It's for the woman who has gone to the doctor and has tried the medication thing, but that's not working. And they're kind of like inflamed and kind of in this chronic low-grade inflammation state because of something hidden in the body. And they need help finding that and supporting that in whatever way they choose they want to go once they have the information. And I just love everything you just said. Yes, 100%.
Perfect. Well, let's turn it a little bit like to the woman's health and her cycles.
Sure.
Sophie, what do you see as common kind of symptoms that occur in the menstrual cycle and hormonal symptoms when people come to you and have these really bad gut disturbances?
Yeah, I would say the most common one, maybe two most common ones would be either an irregular cycle or a really painful cycle. So, and I think it's important to know that it's not one thing leads to one thing. I think the gut is a big place and a big place of inflammation, but there are, of course, other things could be going on like endometriosis or polycystic ovary syndrome. But also those can be made worse by things that are going on in the gut. So I would say a lot of women come to me and first of all, they don't know like what a normal menstrual cycle, quote, normal menstrual cycle should kind of look like. They think there's something wrong, but they're not sure. And they're usually dealing with really severe PMS that is like really ruining either their work life or their relationship or their ability to parent. And they are dealing with like, I'm on the couch and I can't move kind of pain, or super, super heavy. And I'm changing my tampon or my pad every hour. And then I think the other one would be either amenorrhea, so just completely losing their cycle, or an irregular type of cycle where they just have no idea where it's coming from. So quite a lot, I would say, maybe even in all the camps. I think maybe the amenorrhea, the loss of the period, is the least common I see.
When I think about the gut and the liver and how those two work together to rid of like the hormones, can you talk a little bit about endocrine disruptors and xenoestrogens and their effect on the liver and the gut, and therefore our hormones in general?
Oh yeah, I love that you brought that up. So there are chemicals in the world that we put under the xenoestrogen category that can act as if they're estrogen. They can bind to estrogen receptor sites and not let regular estrogen work the way that they're supposed to. So there's kind of endogenous, like you create your own estrogens, and then there's these toxic chemicals that are in our world that can screw the way our hormones look. So it is really important when you think about holistically, how can I support my hormones? If you think that you are estrogen dominant, which usually comes along with things like PMS and heavy cycles and painful cycles, that you do look at your personal care, right? Like there's some really good databases out there. I mean, it's just growing every day, but the Environmental Working Group is a great place to start. We want to look at pesticides on food. So maybe buying from the Clean 15 and not from the Dirty Dozen, which have pesticides and herbicides that are put on there that are known to be endocrine disruptors. What we put on our skin is really absorbable. So our skin and our hair, right? I mean, it takes some time and it can be a little bit overwhelming to like change your cookware and your skincare and your perfumes to essential oils and all these things, but you can do it over time. And when you run out of something, you can just replace it with something that you know what's in it. And so you really want to look at that. And I would say the best resource would be the environmental working group, just to kind of understand where these things are hiding out. They have a great checklist for the house, and then you can see where is my biggest exposure. Maybe it's the soap you're using every day or laundry detergent or something, and you can just make that quick fix. And that's been shown to really help women's hormones.
I love that so much, because it does feel overwhelming for any woman when it's kind of this ambiguous thing. Okay, so I feel really PMSy, or my periods are really heavy, and I know I don't have endometriosis. My progesterone levels seem fine per my labs, but I still feel crazy. That the fact of the matter is that there could be these, estrogens that are, and again, we all are exposed to them. But we have power. We really do have power to decrease some of those in our own home. So it goes from feeling like this is ambiguous, I don't know why I feel so weird, to actually being able to take control in a sense and just swap the stuff out. It's what I'm so passionate about with my own business, Fiat Living. It's like, how do we live naturally? How do we cooperate with our body? How do we allow the earth to cooperate with our body? And I'm so excited that you talked about that, because it's so vital to realize it can be done, and it can be easy and a little fun at times.
It can be fun. That's the other thing. Yeah. I love that you brought that up, Jamie. And I love that that's what you talk about in your business, because it's such a big piece of the puzzle. We're living kind of against nature. We're probably the only beings that are, right? I mean, we're living in, inside, we're blue light exposed, we're toxic chemical exposed, we're dealing with all these issues that our ancestors never had to deal with. And we wonder why we're so sick, but this is all part of it.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I have a question, Sophie, because I know you've worked with a lot of women. What do you see? Because we're talking a lot about, hormones and synthetic hormones and their effect on the body, and also offering alternatives to that. But have you seen the impact of artificial hormones, birth control pills, and any hormone that is put into the body that's artificial? And what have you seen as the impact on women's bodies? And how do you encourage them maybe to look at other options? Because I know it does impact the gut, and it can be a driver of inflammation.
Thanks for asking me that. Yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about this, actually, Teresa. I could probably go off on this subject for about an hour. I actually just reviewed someone's hormone test yesterday that's on synthetic low estrogen pill, and she's dealing with horrible month-long, what she calls PMS. She's dealing with PMDD. She's dealing with anxiety. She's on about 3 different medications for all of this. Her gut's a disaster. I mean, there's just like a laundry list. She has classic postmenopausal hormone levels because of the pill. So I want to explain this for anyone who doesn't understand. And this is not a judgment about whether or not you should take birth control or not. It's about educating women so they can make a choice. I was put on this pill when I was 15 years old. And what I didn't know was that although I had a horrible cycle, it can take a few years for our cycles to balance out. And I was never given that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And when we go on something like a synthetic estrogen, synthetic progestin, not even progesterone, but synthetic hormones, they are synthetic. They are chemicals. Your liver has to detox those. Your gut has to detox those, and they flatline your hormones. Their whole purpose, right, is so that you do not get pregnant. So in order for that to happen, most of them are going to stop the communication between your brain and your ovaries. So when that happens, that means that a woman is not creating normal, a regular estrogen and progesterone ever when they're on the birth control pill, ever. So that means that essentially when you run a Dutch test and you see what someone's hormones look like on pill, they're in menopause from a hormone perspective. They have no progesterone, no testosterone, no estrogen. Mm-hmm. And that can lead to a lot of the symptoms, especially the mental emotional symptoms. And the thing that I see that really frustrates me, and in the case of this woman, I was so proud of her because she kind of decided, I don't really want to be on this. And it's, as a health coach, as a functional health coach, it's never my job to be like, you should come off this pill, right? Because there's good reasons to be on different medications. But it's like, how is this maybe affecting you? Let's look at some correlation. Do you feel like this started when you were on the pill? can you talk to your provider about whether or not there's another option for you? I can talk about that in a second. And I think a lot of women are afraid to come off the pill because either they were put on it because they had such horrible cycles, or they don't know how they would prevent themselves from getting pregnant. I think both are two separate issues. The second one, there's fertility awareness method. You can learn how to chart your own cycle. It's actually a really beautiful thing to know when you're high in progesterone, when you're high in estrogen, so that you can use your hormones as superpowers, instead of them being flatlined. It's actually like an incredible way to give women so much authority in their bodies. And we're afraid of it because we just don't understand it, but we can't get pregnant outside of a 6-day fertile window. So once we learn how to chart, we can really understand that better and protect ourselves if we don't want to get pregnant. And then for the other part, which is I'm afraid to come off the pill because of all these symptoms, that's so valid. And like, that's a consideration. The method I always go with that, if someone's like dead set and they're like, I've talked to my doctor, I'm coming off the pill. What can I do to support myself? I'm always like, let's support your liver, let's support your gut. Let's make sure we replace the nutrients the pill depleted, so that when you do come off, at least your body's hopefully a little bit more stable. So I'm actually going to do a whole workshop on birth control options, so women can just see what are all these options out here, hormonal, non-hormonal, what do they do? And then maybe they can make a great decision with their doctor or provider about what they want to do with their birth control options.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I'm glad that we're talking about this, Teresa. I'm glad you asked that question, because if parents are listening to this too, for their children, I mean, we get that a lot, Sophie. We get that a lot. My daughter, she has these painful periods, terrible periods. And I think we want to put her on the pill. What you just said, Sophie, you said, you had these really heavy periods and they were painful. But if someone had just told you like, oh, actually, by the way, the first few years of menstruation, it's going to be a little interesting, but then, soon enough, it should balance out. And so we need to give that time, which I think is just so interesting. So yeah, it's like these decisions that women are making in the name of, women's healthcare, which drives me crazy, which it doesn't make us healthy. It kind of throws a wrench in the system and can cause this chaos. And if women don't know that ever, they're never even told that information, that just gets me so frustrated.
I know, it sets my hair on fire. I think that's the biggest part for me, is just helping women to understand like what a normal cycle looks like, what are the things they could expect from a normal cycle, and how could they support themselves naturally if they choose that that's what they want. If they choose they want to be on birth control, that's great, but let's educate women on all the different ways that it can affect you, especially mental health. Like I was suicidally depressed when I was on NuvaRing, and it has the highest, I believe it has the highest rate of suicide and depression. Like we should be talking about this and helping young girls especially make better informed choices. And if you think about the fact that what we just talked about with xenoestrogens, and obviously diet plays a huge role. When we're 16, we don't have our diet in check. We don't care what shampoo we're putting on our head, right? Like we're almost setting ourselves up for absolute failure in terms of our hormones. And then we're like jumping to a pill to mask the symptoms until we're like ready to have a baby. And then what kills me is women try to come off the pill and they can't get pregnant, or it's just so painful that they have to go back on. And so I just think that there's other options if women want them.
It just makes so much sense. It makes so much common sense. And again, Western medicine right now is just super frustrating in women's healthcare. It's frustrating in a lot of places, but it particularly is in women's healthcare because it's like we've lost the desire to find the underlying root cause. We're just band-aiding everything. We're not even talking about preventative healthcare. I mean, preventative healthcare is not getting a pap smear or getting a mammogram. I know we call it that, but that didn't prevent you from getting cervical cancer. It didn't prevent you from getting breast cancer to get a mammogram. What prevents you from getting those things is a healthy lifestyle and being aware of your body and making the changes that you need to make to prevent disease. And so we've really got this backwards in all medicine, but particularly in women's health. And we've just kind of decided that, again, because of the sake of like controlling fertility, women should just take this stuff that in reality is super harmful to their bodies in so many ways. And they just don't have the ability to make informed decisions around it. And so this is about empowering women with information so they can make the best decision for their bodies, and they can they can go to their doctors and say, no, I deserve better than this. I deserve more.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Totally. Sophie, what do you wish every young woman knew about her hormone genius?
I wish that every young woman knew to listen to their beautiful bodies and to stop following the crowd. I wish someone told me when I was 16 to listen to what my body needed. And I wish that there was a provider to help me to parse through all the noise. I think especially now with young women, we're like on social media, we're seeing this diet trend, we're trying this random supplement, and we're not able to really drop in and be intuitive. Women are intuitive naturally, but we've been blocked. So your body's talking to you. If you have a symptom, your body's just talking to you. Listen to it. You will more than likely know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, you can always reach out to a provider to help you. But make sure it's a provider that's actually listening to you. Your pain and your symptoms are valid.
Sophie, how can people stay in connection with you? How can they follow you?
Okay, well, everything is She Talks Health. So just She Talks Health podcast, She Talks Health on Instagram, shetalkshealth.com. I mean, if you type it in, you'll probably find me. I have an open DM policy. So if you have a question about your hormones or your gut, just message me. And I can also send anyone who wants to know a link for my new gut and hormone Facebook group, as well as my seed cycling guide. So you're on my email list. So you'll hear about any awesome things I'm doing and more support and all of that. So lots of different ways to get in touch.
Awesome.
I know there's going to be so many people that are going to be excited to reach out to you, Sophie. You're very passionate about this. Obviously, everybody can tell that. And there are so many people that just want more information and want someone to listen to them. And you're someone who definitely has a compassionate heart. So I'm just grateful that you spent this time with us. And when we do, when the listeners get out this podcast, we're going to be sharing all of this information with them and making sure that they know how they can get in touch with you and your resources.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Anyone who wants to reach out, please do. I'm always here to listen. Just remember, I was just like you. So I probably have heard it before, and I'm happy to help you in any way I can.
All right. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Teresa. This was so much fun.